Welcome back to Mission of the Chosen. Today we're pulling back the veil on why people who once dismissed you can no longer hide from the truth. Their stories, their labels, their carefully painted images are breaking apart, and the more you rise, the more their silence betrays what they feel. Let's set this straight from the beginning. I'll only say this here: if you resonate with this message, subscribe so you never miss what's unfolding. Oversubscription is real, but I won't harp on it. This is about you. About the shift you can feel when those who thought they had you pinned down start realizing they were wrong all along. Think of how they tried to define you. They took scraps of gossip, half-truths, and their own shallow judgments and glued them together like a mask. That mask was supposed to stick. It was supposed to make you look ordinary, predictable, safe to ignore, but reality has a cruel way of exposing lies. The moment you began to grow past their imagination, the cracks appeared. And once the cracks appeared, the mask had no chance of staying intact. Human beings hate being wrong. Psychology explains it as cognitive dissonance. The brain fights back when reality shatters belief. It feels like a threat to identity. That's exactly what's happening around you. Their pride is screaming. Their egos are rattling, because every step you take forward says their judgment was worthless. They didn't just miscalculate, they underestimated someone who was never meant to stay small. They thought you would fade into the background, swallowed by the noise of mediocrity. They thought you'd stay quiet, nameless, another person lost in the shuffle. But the universe had other plans. Every setback became resistance, and resistance builds muscle. Every doubt they threw became a seed, and seeds, when pressed deep enough, find a way to sprout. That's why you stand where you stand now, not because you fought for their applause, but because you fought to stay true to your own path. Look at the way their narrative collapses under the weight of your proof. They called you weak, yet your endurance outlasted their laughter. They said you had no voice, but now your words echo where they can't even enter. They told each other you'd give up, and instead, you used their doubt as fuel. The more they resisted you, the more they revealed your power. Because nobody wastes energy pushing against something that isn't moving. Their resistance has always been proof of your impact. Imagine this: a room filled with flickering candles, each flame small and uncertain. Then one burns steady, brighter, refusing to fade. It doesn't compete, it simply exists. Yet the whole room changes because of that one light. That's you. And the weaker flames, instead of drawing strength from your fire, resent it. They whisper, they plot, they hope you dim. But deep down, they know their survival depends on your brightness. They can't stand you, but they can't live without you either. And here comes the irony. Some who once laughed are shifting sides now. They speak softly, offer praise, even act like they believed in you from the start. Not all of it is genuine. Some of it is survival. People see tides turning and they hate being left behind. That's why their mouths, once filled with doubt, now tremble out words of support. You don't need to swallow it whole. You just need to see it for what it is. Evidence that truth always forces choice. Pretend or admit, deny or accept. Either way, they can't unsee what's in front of them anymore. History has repeated this rhythm 1,000 times. Innovators laughed out of rooms until their ideas built new worlds. Galileo mocked until the sky itself testified. Builders, leaders, visionaries first ignored, then doubted, then fought, and finally impossible to deny. And your life right now echoes that same principle. You didn't chase validation because you knew reality would eventually catch up. You didn't scream for recognition because truth doesn't need a microphone. Truth only needs time. Why does it sting them so deeply? Because your rise exposes their stagnation. Your strength reveals their weakness. Your forward motion reminds them how little they've moved. That's the mirror they hate looking into, because it shows them what they could have been if they'd had your discipline. And mirrors are cruel to those who avoid them. Here's another picture. They built a cage for you, bars made of low expectations and whispered judgments. They thought you'd rattle in it forever. But while they watched, you found the key in your own hands. You stepped out and ran so far across the field they can't even see the horizon you're chasing. That's what kills them, not just that you escaped, but that you thrived where they swore you'd collapse. You never needed their permission, you never needed their stamp. Validation is always late. It arrives after the work is undeniable. And now, They have no choice but to sit in silence, while your results stand taller than their stories. Silence, that's their confession. The quiet is louder than words, because it's safer for them to choke back the truth than to admit how wrong they were. And here's what makes you unshakable. Your value isn't built on their claps or their doubts. It's built on the nights you refused to quit, the mornings you rose again, the scars you carried like armor. That's what they can't take from you. That's why their whispers crumble. You've proven that consistency is heavier than gossip, and weight always wins. So let their stories burn. Let their whispers fade. Let their silence stand. Because every time you rise higher, every time you stand stronger, you carve proof into reality that no illusion can cover. And that's where this part ends, with the one truth they can't stand. The same mouths that mocked you now bite their tongues, because silence feels safer than admitting they misjudged you. That silence is your loudest victory. They told themselves a story about you. In their version, you were ordinary, predictable, easy to dismiss. That story became their comfort. It allowed them to laugh without guilt, to gossip without consequence, to believe they had you figured out. But that story was never real. And now, with every move you make, the cracks in their illusion are spreading wider. The truth is simple. You didn't just survive what they threw at you, you outgrew it. You didn't collapse under pressure, you turned it into fuel. That's why they can't rest easy anymore. Because the version of you they invented is dead, and the person standing before them now proves their judgment was worthless. Look closely at what's happening. The very people who painted you as weak are forced to watch you carry weights they never could. The same ones who laughed at your silence are now straining to hear your words. They told each other you'd never matter, but their eyes betray them whenever your name surfaces. They see you, even when they try not to. Imagine the cage they built for you, its bars forged from low expectations and casual slander. They thought you'd stay rattling inside, begging for release. But instead, you discovered something they never imagined. The lock was never real. You walked out, leaving them clutching keys that no longer fit anything. That's the picture eating them alive, not just that you escaped, but that you were never trapped in the first place. Resistance is not random. It comes when presence can no longer be ignored. They don't waste stones on barren trees. They aim at the branches heavy with fruit. That's why you felt the sting of their mockery. That's why they worked so hard to keep your image small. Your growth terrified them, because it meant facing their own stagnation. And now that your results are visible, their fear is justified. Think about how many times they said you'd quit, how many times they smirked and whispered that your effort was pointless. But here's the secret they couldn't see: every doubt they threw became resistance training. Every sneer became a push-up for your spirit. And resistance always builds strength. That's why you're here now, standing in a position they swore you'd never reach. Psychology tells us the mind clings to its beliefs because letting go feels like death. That's why they're restless now. It's not just envy, it's survival. To admit you were right is to admit they were blind. To recognize your rise is to confess their failure to see it coming. And that confession tastes like poison to their pride. They thought the story they wrote would last forever. They called you average, convinced themselves you'd never break through. But the story is collapsing. And the sound of that collapse isn't quiet. It echoes in their silence. It vibrates in the way they avoid eye contact. It shows in the way their voices trail off when your name comes up. Silence is their confession. Picture a race where they set the finish line far beyond your reach. They mocked as you started running, sure you'd fall before the end. But while they mocked, you moved. Step after step, day after day, you kept going. And when you reached the line they thought impossible, you didn't stop, you kept running. Now you stand on a mountain they didn't even know existed. That's the reason their words sound empty now. Your proof has outpaced their imagination. This is the moment gossip collapses. Gossip has power only in the dark. It spreads in corners, in shadows, in whispers. But truth doesn't need to fight gossip, it only needs to exist. And once it does, gossip suffocates. That's why their lies feel brittle now, because the reality of your rise is stronger than anything they invented. And yet, watch how quickly people switch. Some who doubted you will slide closer, offering smiles, acting like they knew all along, not because they truly believe, but because survival demands it. They see the tide turning. They see that your presence is undeniable, and no one wants to be left behind when the current shifts. Their loyalty may be shallow, but their change of heart is still proof that your impact can't be denied. It's not the first time history has played this out. Innovators were mocked until their ideas built the future. Truth-tellers were silenced until their words outlived every lie. First ignored, then ridiculed, then resisted, then undeniable. That rhythm never fails. And you're living it now. Here's what unsettles them most. Your rise isn't flashy. It isn't luck. It isn't a fluke. If it were, they could dismiss it. But it's consistent, rooted in discipline, forged in quiet hours when no one was watching. That's why they can't explain it away. That's why they choke on their disbelief. Because your success isn't random, it's earned. And that's the heaviest truth of all. Earned success cannot be erased. It stands taller than gossip, heavier than rumor, stronger than envy. And when faced with it, all the lies they built collapse under their own weakness. So let them sit in their silence. Let them rewrite their own memories, pretending they never doubted. Let them whisper to each other, searching for excuses. None of it matters anymore. What matters is the reality standing in front of them, undeniable, unshakable. They thought their words could bury you, but words rot while evidence grows. And now, surrounded by the ruins of their lies, they're forced to face the only thing left standing, your truth. They believed silence meant weakness. They mistook your quiet for emptiness, your patience for ignorance. What they never understood is that silence can be the sharpest weapon, the kind that slices through noise without making a sound. While they filled the air with chatter, you studied. While they bragged about victories that never came, you collected lessons. While they mocked, you sharpened your mind. And now, that quiet strength has become the blade they never saw coming. Consider this. They were reading from children's books while you were writing your own library. They laughed at your silence, thinking it meant you had nothing to say, but silence was strategy. You weren't wasting words, you were saving them for the moment they mattered, and that moment has arrived. Intelligence, the kind that unsettles people, isn't about diplomas hanging on walls. It isn't measured by letters after a name. It's measured by the ability to adapt, to observe, to evolve. You've carried that kind of intelligence all along, the kind that sees through deception like glass, that dissects problems others can't even name, that grows sharper under pressure. And every time you reveal that, their masks slip. They realize too late you were never behind, you were simply moving in silence. This is why they panic now. They expected you to stumble over illusions, but you cut through them with ease. They thought they could predict your moves, but you adapted faster than their calculations. Adaptability terrifies them, because it means they can't trap you. They can't bind you to their rules, can't corner you with their labels. Every time they think they've boxed you in, you bend the walls until they crack. That flexibility is a kind of power they'll never understand. Why did they misjudge your mind so badly? Because you didn't flaunt it. You didn't waste time proving yourself to people who were never ready to listen. You didn't show your cards until the table was stacked in your favor. That restraint became your strength. And now, when your brilliance shows itself, the gap between you and them feels like a canyon they can't cross. Picture this. They built a puppet version of you in their minds, strings tied to their assumptions. They thought they could pull those strings and predict your every move, but the strings snapped. The puppet collapsed, and in its place stands the real you, sharper, stronger, more complex than anything they imagined. That gap between their fiction and your reality eats at them, because it forces them to admit they never truly saw you at all. Their fantasy was fragile, but it gave them comfort. It allowed them to dismiss you, to act superior, to avoid the truth. Now that fantasy is crumbling in their hands, and they're left with the unsettling realization that the image they built was a lie. They can't reconcile it. Their minds wrestle with the dissonance, and in that struggle, they're exposed. What makes this moment powerful isn't just your intelligence, it's how you used it. You didn't flaunt it, you applied it. You turned every scar into wisdom, every setback into strategy, every betrayal into insight. That's the kind of intelligence people can't fake. It shows in your choices, in your timing, in the way you carry yourself when others would collapse. Now they whisper among themselves, asking how you saw what they couldn't, how you read patterns they missed, how you stayed steps ahead without saying a word. And the answer cuts deep, because you lived too much, learned too much, endured too much to be anyone's fool. Your silence wasn't emptiness, it was preparation. That's why their games no longer work on you. Every trick they try, you've already dissected. Every trap they set, you've already mapped. Deception only works on the blind, and you are not blind anymore. Nothing terrifies deceivers more than being seen clearly. Your gaze itself is enough to make them stumble, because they know you understand more than you reveal. Think of the power in that. You don't need to shout to prove yourself. You don't need to expose every detail of what you know. Your awareness alone strips their illusions bare. They feel it when you walk into the room, that weight of recognition, the silent understanding that you're not fooled, and that silence terrifies them more than any confrontation could. They wonder now, how did we miscalculate so badly? How did we underestimate this person? And the truth is brutal. They never wanted to see your depth. They chose the shallow version because it was easier, because it kept them comfortable. They ignored the signs of your brilliance because believing in it would have forced them to confront their own lack. They weren't blind by accident, they were blind by choice. But blindness doesn't protect anyone forever. Reality doesn't stay hidden. And now, your intelligence burns too brightly to be denied. Every time you adapt, every time you cut through a problem, every time you reveal depth they never suspected, it slices away another piece of the lie they clung to. This is why they're restless. It's why they whisper. It's why their silence feels heavier now. Because your brilliance doesn't just illuminate you, it exposes them. It reveals their ignorance, their laziness, their arrogance. And that exposure is unbearable. Knowledge is fire, and fire doesn't just warm, it burns. You carry that fire now, and it shines through everything you are. So let them sit in the ruins of their illusions. Let them wrestle with the fact that the puppet they built of you has dissolved into dust. Their control is gone, their predictions shattered, their pride wounded, and all that remains is the undeniable truth of who you are. They thought silence meant stupidity, but silence became the sharpest blade. They thought patience meant weakness, but patience turned into strategy. They thought you were easy to read, but your depth drowned their assumptions. And now, every time they try to deny it, they cut themselves on the edge of your mind. They once laughed at your quiet, now they fear it. And that shift, subtle, undeniable, is the wound they can't stop bleeding from. They spent years crafting a false image of you. Piece by piece, they sculpted a mask and forced it onto your face. That mask wasn't meant to honor you, it was designed to shrink you, to flatten your complexity, to reduce you to something safe, ordinary, and forgettable. In their version, you were never a threat, never a possibility, never someone who could stand taller than their control. But here's the truth they didn't prepare for. Masks don't last forever. The moment reality steps into the room, plaster cracks, clay crumbles, and false images collapse into dust. That's what's happening now. The puppet they created in their minds no longer matches the person you've become. And every time you move forward, every time you speak, every time you prove your resilience, that mask explodes in their hands. Think about the comfort those masks gave them. They let people feel superior, safe, in control. They could dismiss you because the image they invented was small enough to ignore. But the problem with false images is simple. They never hold up against truth. And the truth of who you are is too heavy, too sharp, too undeniable to be covered anymore. Imagine them sculpting a fragile figure of you out of soft clay. Breakable, fragile, easy to control. That's how they wanted to see you. But while they shaped lies, you were becoming steel. And now, when you step into view, that fragile sculpture shatters. What replaces it is a version of you they never prepared for, one they can't dismiss, one they can't define, one they can't break. This is why their hands tremble now. It's not just surprise, it's fear. Fear of how wrong they were, fear of how much power you carry. Fear of the fact that their old narrative no longer matches the reality staring them down. And here's the part that rattles them most. They never really saw you. They saw only what they wanted to see. They ignored the signs, ignored the depth, ignored the brilliance, because acknowledging it would have unsettled them. So instead, they chose the easy path. They built a mask, slapped it on, and pretended it was the whole story. But now, that mask is dissolving in their hands, and they're left with a truth too heavy to deny. Why do people build masks in the first place? Because it gives them control. If they can define you, they don't have to confront you. If they can shrink you, they don't have to feel small standing next to you. If they can tell themselves you're average, they can avoid facing the brilliance they lack. But lies can only live for a season, and every season comes to an end. This is that ending. Every achievement you claim, every barrier you break, every step forward tears holes in the mask they built. It doesn't matter how tightly they cling, it falls apart anyway. Because truth doesn't need to defend itself. It simply stands while lies collapse. Picture a stage where the spotlight finally flips on. For years, they controlled the script, casting you as background, as filler, as invisible. But when the light shines, the audience sees the real character. They see the depth, the presence, the undeniable power that was hidden in the shadows. And no amount of rewriting can make the crowd unsee what's been revealed. That's where you are now. Their whispers sound different these days. They still talk, still gossip, still search for new ways to box you in. But you can hear the cracks in their voices, the desperation in their tone. Because deep down, they know their masks don't fit anymore. They know their stories don't hold. They know reality has outgrown their lies. This is why they avoid you, why their eyes dart away, why conversations turn awkward when your name comes up. It's because the mask they built is gone, and what stands in its place is too powerful to deny. You were never made to be ordinary. You were never meant to blend in, to be invisible, to be wallpaper in the background of someone else's story. You were designed to stand out, to disrupt, to challenge. That's why their masks collapsed, because they tried to make you something you were never designed to be. And here's the lesson buried in all of this. You don't have to fight their false images. You don't have to argue with their lies. You don't even have to tear down the masks yourself. Time does it for you. Reality does it for you. Growth does it for you. You simply keep moving, and eventually their illusions crumble under the weight of your truth. They will ask themselves, how could we have been so wrong? How did we miss this? The answer is simple. They weren't looking. They weren't listening. They weren't willing to see beyond their own comfort. And now, the dissonance between their fantasy and your reality is too wide to ignore. Masks are fragile things. They crack when pressed. They crumble when tested. And right now, every step you take is pressure against the lies. Every victory is another blow. Every truth revealed is another fracture in the facade. And when masks fall, they fall hard. So let them scramble to pick up the pieces. Let them choke on the dust of their own false images. While they wrestle with illusions, you stand firm as proof. Proof that their story was never real. Proof that their control was an illusion. Proof that you were never the version they tried to force on you. You don't have to shout about it. You don't have to remind them. You simply exist as the undeniable evidence, and that evidence burns hotter than any argument ever could. They built a mask to hide you, but you were never meant to be hidden. And now that the mask is gone, there's nothing left to cover their lies. Only the real you remains unshaken, undeniable, unbreakable. And here's the sting they can't escape. The truth doesn't just destroy their image of you, it destroys their image of themselves. Because every time they see you, they're forced to face how blind they were, how shallow their judgment was, how fragile their pride really islanded. That's the wound that won't heal. The puppet is gone, the mask is dust, and the real you is standing taller than their lies ever could. They tried to sculpt you in clay, but you became steel. And now, every time they see you, they're cut by the sharp edge of their own falsehoods. They always wanted you to fade into the background. Quiet, forgettable, another shadow among millions. To them, that was safer if you blended in. They could stay comfortable. But you didn't. You refused to disappear, and in that refusal, you became impossible to ignore. Look around at how they react now. Their eyes linger longer. Their conversations pause when your name comes up. They can no longer pretend you're wallpaper, because you've turned into the entire mural. Their comfort was built on your invisibility, and the moment you broke that script, their comfort cracked with it. Think about it. They imagined a world of gray stones, all blending together, lifeless and predictable. You were supposed to be just another stone. But then light hit, and one stone gleamed like a diamond. That was you. And in that moment, every comparison they used collapsed. Because once people see the diamond, they can't go back to pretending the stones all look the same. It unsettles them, this truth. Because if you were supposed to be ordinary, what does that say about their judgment? If you were meant to fade away, how do they explain your brilliance? The questions eat at them, because every answer points back to the same conclusion: they underestimated you. And underestimation, when exposed, stings like fire. Their whispers reveal their struggle. Why can't they just be like everyone else? Why do they stand out? The answer is simple. You were never meant to conform. Conformity suffocates those who carry originality. You're not wired to repeat tired patterns or live inside their shallow frames. Your path is disruptive, because disruption is how truth enters the room. And disruption always makes the comfortable nervous. This is the paradox of your presence. They resent your light, yet they can't stop staring. They resent your difference, yet they can't deny it. They resent the way you stand out, yet they know deep down that the world needs it. That tension is what rattles them, because every time you shine, it reminds them of everything they settled for. Your uniqueness isn't about noise. It isn't about flash or drama. It's about substance. It's the way you carry wisdom born from scars, the way you refuse to bend when others cave, the way you choose authenticity over applause. That kind of difference can't be faked, can't be replicated, and can't be silenced. Picture walking into a crowded room. Everyone's voice blends together, echoing the same phrases, repeating the same stories. Then one voice cuts through, not louder, but clearer. It doesn't need to shout, because clarity always rises above noise. That's you. And clarity unsettles those who depend on confusion to hide. This is why they try to push back harder now. They gossip louder, they invent stories, they stretch lies further, not because you're weak, but because you're undeniable. Their resistance isn't proof of your failure, it's proof of your power. People don't fight what isn't moving, they only fight what threatens to expose them. And your light exposes them every time you step forward. The truth is, your difference has become a mirror. When you stand tall, it reflects back their mediocrity. When you move forward, it reveals how stuck they've been. When you create, it reveals their stagnation. And no one likes a mirror when it exposes what they've avoided seeing. That's why they resist you. Not because of who you are, but because of what you reveal about them. They wonder silently, what makes this person so different? They search for explanations: luck, chance, timing. But those excuses don't hold, because luck doesn't last this long. Chance doesn't build this much. Timing doesn't explain resilience that refuses to die. What makes you different is your refusal to accept smallness. Your hunger to grow, your courage to push, your unwillingness to shrink. That's what terrifies them, because it's something they can't manufacture. And here's the irony. The very thing they mocked you for is what makes you undeniable now. They mocked your silence, but silence made you sharp. They mocked your patience, but patience built your strength. They mocked your difference, but difference became your proof. Every insult they threw became evidence of how blind they were, and now, those same traits burn them every time they see you. It's no accident that some people start to switch sides now. They sense the tide turning. They see the diamond glinting where they once swore only stone existed. Some join because they respect you, others because they fear being left behind. Either way, the shift proves the same thing. Truth forces choice. Pretend blindness or admit reality, and slowly, more of them are admitting reality. But remember, this switching sides doesn't always mean loyalty. Some come close out of convenience, not conviction. You don't need to push them away, but you do need to keep your circle clear. Not every admirer deserves access. Not every supporter deserves a seat at your table. Discernment is your guardrail here, because your rise will attract both allies and opportunists. And that rise? It was never about blending in. It was never about disappearing. You were never designed to echo. You were designed to resonate, to stand out. To be the voice in the noise, the diamond in the field, the flame in the dark. That's why their attempts to cover you fail every time. You can't bury what was built to shine. Now they sit with a truth they can't deny. You were never meant to be wallpaper. You were meant to be the mural, bold and impossible to overlook. You were never meant to be a stone. You were meant to be the diamond, You were never meant to fade. You were meant to blaze. And here's the part that burns them the most. Your difference has revealed their sameness. Your authenticity has revealed their masks. Your brilliance has revealed their shadows. And once seen, it can't be unseen. They wanted you to be invisible, but invisibility was never your destiny. And now, every step you take reminds them of the truth they tried so hard to bury. The field is full of gray stones, but only one catches the Sunday, and every time its light flashes, the others are forced to remember what they will never be. They thought they had you measured. They believed your worth could be boxed into simple categories: your job, your income, your role, your status. To them, you were a surface, a headline, a quick judgment. But the mistake they made was confusing the surface with the core. What unsettles them now is realizing that your strength never lived in appearances. It was always in the depth they never took the time to see. Think of the ocean. People skim across the top, laughing at the waves, mocking the ripples, thinking they know what lies beneath. But the surface is only a fraction of the story. Beneath are depths so vast, so powerful, so untouchable, that no shallow gaze could ever measure them. That's you. They thought they had you mapped out, but they only skimmed the surface. And now, as glimpses of your depth rise to the top, it terrifies them. This is the ache in their chest right now. They never knew you. They thought they did, but they never looked beyond their assumptions. And every time your depth reveals itself through your insight, your resilience, your ability to grow, it rattles them, because it forces them to admit they were wrong from the start. Why didn't they see it? Because shallow minds avoid depth. Looking deeper would have demanded courage. It would have forced them to confront truths about themselves they weren't ready to face. So they stayed safe, clinging to the surface, repeating easy stories, convincing themselves they knew the whole picture. But illusions always collapse when truth rises. And your truth has been rising all along. They told themselves you were simple, but simplicity was their projection. They told themselves you were predictable, but unpredictability has always been your strength. They told themselves you were ordinary, but ordinary never explained the fire in your core. What they see now unsettles them because it doesn't fit their story. It breaks the mold they clung to. And broken molds leave people scrambling. The core is dangerous to the shallow because it exposes their lack. Your presence is proof that depth exists, and that proof alone forces them to realize how little they've grown. That's why they resist you. That's why they avoid your gaze. That's why they whisper behind your back. It's not about you being wrong, it's about them not being able to face what you represent. Imagine two houses. One looks polished and impressive from the outside, shiny, flashy, the kind that turns heads. But the foundation is weak, and a single storm threatens to tear it down. The other looks modest, quiet, nothing to brag about, but beneath it is bedrock, a foundation unshakable, unmovable, untouchable. That's you. They invested everything in appearances. You invested in the core, and now, the storm that leaves them trembling only sharpens you. This is why their words sound hollow now. They can talk about status, titles, possessions, but those fade. Cars break down, houses crack, applause dies out, none of it lasts. The only thing that stands is essence, the truth at the center. And that's what rattles them most. They can't touch your essence. No matter what they say, no matter what they try to strip away, they can't reach the core. And that core is where your true power lies. It's in the way you adapt when the world shifts. It's in the way you rise after setbacks. It's in the way you carry wisdom others never earned. They judged your surface, but it's your depth that drowns them. Notice how people respond differently to you now. Some lean closer, drawn by the strength they can't explain. Others step back, unsettled by the depth they can't handle. Both reactions prove the same thing. They see something they can't define, something they can't replicate. And that mystery unsettles them because it reminds them of how shallow they've chosen to remain. This is why they gossip louder now, why they invent stories, why they cling to shallow definitions, because it's easier to pretend you're simple than to admit you're deep. It's easier to label you than to face the truth that you are beyond labels. Gossip is their shield against reality, but shields always break under pressure, and every step you take applies more pressure. The truth is, people fear what they can't control. They fear what they can't predict, and they fear what forces them to face themselves. You are all three. You can't be controlled, you refuse to be predictable, and your depth is a mirror to their shallowness. That combination makes you dangerous to their comfort, and that's why they resist you. But don't mistake their resistance for your weakness. Resistance proves your strength. They wouldn't push back if you weren't pressing forward. They wouldn't whisper if you weren't making noise just by existing. They wouldn't avoid you if your presence didn't expose something they didn't want to see. Their behavior is their confession. And here's the part you must hold on to. Your value is not in the surface. It's not in titles, applause, or possessions. Those can all be taken. Your value is in the essence they can't touch. It's in the fire they can't extinguish, the depth they can't measure, the resilience they can't break. That's why you're untouchable, even when storms rage. Think of how storms have shaped you already. Every disappointment carved strength into your bones. Every betrayal sharpened your instincts. Every failure taught you lessons that shallow lives will never understand. That's the difference between you and them. You've been to depths they never dared to swim, and now that depth is your foundation. So when their stories collapse, when their judgments crumble, when their masks fall away, you don't need to defend yourself. You just need to stand. Because truth doesn't shout, it simply stands until lies collapse under their own weight, and your essence has been standing all along. They wanted you defined by the surface. But the surface was never your story. The core has always been your power, and no matter how they twist, no matter how they resist, that's the part they will never take. They skimmed the waves, mocked the ripples, laughed at the surface. But depth has a way of swallowing the shallow. And every time they see you now, they feel the pull of an ocean they will never be able to cross. They believed you were a piece in their game, a pawn to be shifted, manipulated, controlled. To them, you were predictable, someone they could use when convenient, discard when not. That was the arrogance of their perception. They thought they were the players, and you were the board. But time revealed the opposite. You weren't the pawn. You were the player who saw the whole strategy long before they made their first move. This is the sting they live with now. They set traps, confident you would stumble into them. They whispered lies, convinced you'd believe them. They played games, thinking you'd never see through the rules. But patience was your strategy, not your weakness. You let them think you were blind. You let them believe they were in control. And while they plotted, you were already 10 steps ahead, watching them write their own downfall. Imagine a hunter setting a trap in the woods. He hides it, baits it, and walks away certain of victory. But when he returns, the trap is sprung on empty air, while the prey he thought was helpless is already standing behind him, holding the map of every move he made. That's you. They thought they had you caught, but you were studying them the whole time. Nothing terrifies a deceiver more than being outmaneuvered by the person they swore was naive. Think of how often they mistook patience for ignorance. They laughed at your restraint, never realizing that silence watches, that waiting learns, that patience is strategy in disguise. Every scar you carry became a lesson. Every betrayal sharpened your instincts. Every lie taught you how to see through the next one faster. That's why their games don't work anymore. You've mastered the rules they try to use against you, and mastery makes their weapons useless. Deception dies in the presence of clarity. That's what they feel when they're around you now. You don't need to call out their schemes. You don't need to list every trick. Your awareness alone is enough to shake them. They see it in your eyes, the weight of knowing, the sharpness of recognition. They know you understand more than you reveal, and that knowledge strips them of their control. This is why they whisper now, why their tone changes, why they stumble over their words when you're near, because your clarity terrifies them. They can't play games with someone who sees the board. They can't manipulate someone who understands the rules. They can't trap someone who already mapped the exits. Their frustration is proof of your power. The truth is, people underestimated you because you didn't fight every battle. You didn't react to every insult. You didn't chase every lie. To them, that looked like weakness. But restraint isn't weakness, it's strength under discipline. You knew where to put your energy, and it wasn't in playing their small games. It was in building your foundation, sharpening your tools, preparing for the day when their schemes would collapse under their own weight. And collapse they did. Every rumor, every manipulation, every trick is unraveling now, not because you exposed them with noise, but because truth has a way of surfacing no matter how deep lies are buried. They're left scrambling, trying to patch holes, trying to invent new illusions, but nothing holds. Because once clarity enters, lies can't survive. This is why their fear feels heavier now. It's not just fear of being wrong about you, it's fear of being exposed by you. They sense that you know more than you say. They sense that their secrets aren't as hidden as they think, and the more they sense it, the more powerless they feel. Think of the way a card game works. Someone bluffs, pretending to hold the winning hand. Confidence fills their voice, arrogance sharpens their smile. But then you flip your cards, calm and steady, revealing that their bluff never stood a chance. That's what your life feels like to them now. Their bluff has been called, their game is over. And the silence that follows is the sound of their defeat. The irony is that they underestimated the wrong person. They thought they could toy with you, but every move they made became a lesson for you. Every game sharpened your strategy. Every attempt to fool you only trained your eye to see through deception faster. They didn't realize they were teaching you how to beat them. Their schemes became your study material, and now you graduate every time they try again. The weight of your clarity is unbearable for them. They can't hide in shadows anymore, because shadows collapse when faced with fire. They can't pretend anymore, because pretense falls apart under truth. And they can't manipulate you anymore, because you've outgrown every tool they ever used. That's the victory you carry, not just surviving their games, but mastering the very rules they thought would destroy you. You don't even need to expose them loudly. Your calm presence does it for you. The way you move with certainty, the way you refuse to react to bait, the way you stand firm when others would flinch. That composure is the clearest evidence of all. It shows you are no longer the person they thought you were, and it shows they were never as powerful as they believed. The game is over, they know it, and what unsettles them most is realizing that you never needed to fight them to win. You just had to keep seeing clearly, keep moving forward, keep letting time dismantle their illusions. They thought you were a pawn, but pawns, when they keep moving forward, transform into queens, and queens change the entire board. That's the sting burning in them now, not that you played their game, but that you outgrew it entirely. The resistance you feel now isn't random, it's not bad luck, it's not coincidence. It's proof that your presence has weight, proof that your existence is shaking the ground others thought was stable. Because no one throws stones at a tree without fruit. No one resists what isn't a threat. The pushback you've experienced is evidence that you're producing something real, something they can't ignore. Look carefully at the way resistance works. It rarely comes openly. It comes in whispers, in gossip, in subtle undermining. It shows up in the sideways comments, the smirks, the rumors that spread like smoke. Why? Because confronting you directly would mean admitting your strength. Attacking you outright would mean acknowledging you matter, so they try to minimize you from the shadows, hoping to weaken what they can't control. But here's the paradox. Their resistance doesn't weaken you, it validates you. Every attempt to silence you is proof that your voice carries. Every obstacle thrown in your path is proof that your steps matter. Every rumor whispered is proof that your name carries more power than they want to admit. If you weren't rising, they wouldn't bother. Imagine a mountain. Storm clouds gather around it, lightning cracks, winds roar. But the storm doesn't form because the mountain is weak, it forms because the mountain stands tall enough to disrupt the sky. That's you. Your very presence disrupts patterns they thought were unshakable. Your rise unsettles the comfortable. And storms gather not because you're fragile, but because you're unmovable. Think about what resistance really reveals. It reveals fear. Fear of being exposed. Fear of being left behind. Fear of losing control. That's why their pushback is so sharp. It's their confession, hidden in hostility. The more they resist you, the more they admit that you've outgrown the box they built. This is why gossip follows you, why whispers never stop, why lies seem to multiply. It's not about truth, it's about survival. People cling to lies because lies let them feel safe. Lies let them believe they still have control. But lies are fragile things. They break under the weight of evidence, and every step you take forward applies more weight. You didn't ask for their resistance, but you can use it. Opposition is fuel. Every insult can sharpen your focus. Every obstacle can strengthen your resolve. Every closed door can redirect you to one that opens wider. Resistance is the tax you pay for being real, and paying that tax means you're operating on a level they never thought you'd reach. Notice how predictable the cycle island. First they ignored you, then they laughed, then they resisted, and finally, they'll have no choice but to admit what they see. You're in the resistance stage now, and though it burns, it's proof that you're on the verge of undeniable. That's the rhythm of truth. Ignored, mocked, resisted, undeniable, and you are walking that rhythm step by step. What unsettles them most is that you didn't collapse under resistance. Most people break when pressure builds, most shrink back into silence, but you didn't. You stood taller. You absorbed the blows and turned them into fuel. That's why their hostility has grown louder. It's their last desperate attempt to stop what can't be stopped. Imagine a river blocked by stones. The water doesn't stop. It builds pressure. It carves new paths. It finds ways around the obstacles, and eventually, the stones themselves are carried away. That's you. Every obstacle only redirects your flow until your persistence breaks the very barriers they built. Resistance never stopped a river. It only proved the river's power. And here's the part that shakes them. Your rise isn't just about you. It exposes them. Your strength reveals their weakness. Your courage reveals their cowardice. Your consistency reveals their excuses. That's why they fight so hard to pull you down, because every step you take upward is a mirror they can't stand to look into. But mirrors don't lie. They show what's there, whether people want to see it or not, and your life has become a mirror they can't escape. They can avoid your presence. They can deny your progress, but deep down, they know the truth. They know you're rising, and their resistance is their confession. Don't mistake the stones they throw as signs you're failing. See them for what they are, evidence that you've grown too visible to ignore. Opposition doesn't come to the invisible, it only comes to the undeniable. That's you now, and no matter how sharp the resistance feels, it's proof of your strength. Think of the irony here. Every attempt to silence you only spreads your influence further. Every attempt to bury you only proves your roots are deeper than they imagined. Every attempt to resist you only confirms what they fear most, that you've become unstoppable. This is why their whispers grow louder, why their stories multiply, why their efforts feel desperate, because they sense it. The tide has turned, and it's turned in your favor, and no amount of resistance can stop what's already in motion. So let them push, let them resist, let them throw stones. It's all proof. Proof that you've broken the limits they set. Proof that you've disrupted the comfort they clung to. Proof that your presence matters more than they'll ever admit out loud. They can resist all they want, but resistance only exposes the truth. And the truth is that you've become too strong, too steady, too undeniable to be silenced. Their pushback is their confession, and confession always comes before collapse. They built a picture of you that never existed. A cartoon, sketched from rumors, colored with assumptions, shaded with envy. That picture was easy for them to believe in because it kept you small, predictable, easy to dismiss. They convinced themselves the image was accurate, and for a while, they even convinced others too. But lies don't last forever, and now that the truth is standing, their picture has collapsed into dust. This is the sting they feel now, the humiliation of realizing they were wrong, not by accident, but by choice. They never looked deeper, they never wanted to. They preferred the version of you that fit their comfort, because the real you would have unsettled them. So they built their false version out of scraps of gossip and fragments of judgment, and they told themselves it was enough. But now, the cracks are obvious. Their cartoon can't explain your depth, their sketch can't explain your rise, their shallow story can't explain your resilience. Reality has torn through their illusion, and no one can unsee the truth anymore. Imagine someone standing outside a fortress, staring only at the walls. They mock the stone, call it plain, call it fragile, convinced they know everything about what's inside. But then the gates open. They glimpse towers, chambers, and strength far beyond their imagination, and in that moment their ignorance is undeniable. That's what's happening to them now. They thought they knew you from the outside, but they never had a clue what lived within. What burns them most is that their false picture gave them confidence. It let them laugh at you, dismiss you, feel superior, but the truth has shattered that comfort. Now, instead of feeling powerful, they feel exposed. Every step you take, every win you claim, every time you stand stronger than before, it's like a mirror shattering in their hands. And each shard cuts deeper, reminding them of their arrogance. They whisper now, "How did we miss it? How did we get this so wrong?" The answer is simple. They didn't want the truth. Lies were easier. Lies didn't threaten their pride. Lies didn't force them to confront their own weaknesses. But comfort never lasts, and the comfort of their lie has now collapsed, leaving them restless, bitter, and ashamed. This is why they cling so hard to denial. Because admitting the truth about you means admitting something about themselves, that they are not the sharp judges they pretended to be, that they missed what was right in front of them, that they mocked what was stronger than they could handle. That realization is unbearable, so they resist it with all they have. But resistance doesn't erase reality, it only delays the inevitable. You don't have to argue with their picture of you. You don't have to prove yourself to them. The collapse of their illusion is proof enough. Time has already done the work. Every step you take forward erases more of the cartoon they drew. Every achievement tears another hole in their story. Every ounce of strength you show leaves them choking on the dust of their lies. And here's the truth. They never knew you at all. Not the depths of your resilience, not the fire of your persistence, not the hunger that drove you when no one clapped. They mistook your silence for emptiness. They mistook your patience for weakness. They mistook your struggle for defeat. And now, all those misjudgments are eating them alive, because the reality in front of them makes their old picture look pathetic. Think about how many times they tried to paint you as average. They spoke with confidence, as if they were experts on your life. But those same words are now the chains wrapped around their pride, because every one of your victories proves them wrong again, and the more you rise, the heavier those chains become. There's no escaping it. Lies are fragile. They crumble under the weight of evidence, and evidence is what you've built brick by brick, step by step, day after day. It's not a matter of opinion. It's not a matter of debate. It's proof. And proof silences gossip more effectively than any argument ever could. This is why their silence is louder now. They can't openly mock you anymore, because too many people see the truth. They can't dismiss you with the same arrogance, because your results contradict their every word. So they go quiet, hoping no one remembers what they once said. But silence is its own confession, and the weight of that silence presses heavier than laughter ever did. Your life is the contradiction to their lies. Every time you move forward, you remind them of how wrong they were. Every time you succeed, you remind them of the cartoon they clung to. And every time you shine, you prove that their false image never had power in the first place. So let them wrestle with the ruins of their own creation. Let them struggle with the dissonance between the picture they painted and the truth that stands. You don't need to defend yourself. You don't need to fight them. The collapse of their illusion is victory enough. And here's the sharpest cut. They didn't just misjudge you. They revealed themselves. Because people who rush to reduce others are always confessing something about their own depth. Shallow people create shallow stories. Envious people create lies. Cowardly people invent cages for others because they fear breaking free themselves. Their false picture of you says more about them than it ever did about you. Now they sit in the wreckage, forced to confront what they denied. The cartoon is gone, the illusion is dead, and the truth, the real, undeniable truth, is standing where they swore it never would. They built a cheap drawing, hoping it would last, but reality handed them a masterpiece they can't erase, and that masterpiece is you. They always skimmed your surface. Quick glances, shallow judgments, easy labels. To them, you were simple, predictable, unthreatening. They believed the surface told the whole story, and that belief made them comfortable. But comfort is dangerous, because comfort makes people blind. What unsettles them now is realizing that what they saw on the surface was only the smallest fraction of who you are. Depth drowns the shallow. That's the truth they're choking on. They thought they could size you up in a single glance, write you off with a single word, dismiss you with a single smirk. But what they didn't see was the vastness beneath the hunger, the resilience, the wisdom carved by scars. They stopped at the ripples, never imagining the currents below. And now, the weight of that depth is pulling their illusions under. Picture someone standing on the shore of an ocean. They mock the water, call it small, predictable, safe. They point to the ripples and laugh, convinced that's all their island. But beneath the surface are trenches deeper than mountains are tall. Beneath are currents strong enough to sink ships. That's you. They thought they could skim your surface and know you. But they were blind to the ocean you've always been. Why do shallow people avoid depth? Because depth demands courage. It forces you to confront what lies beneath. And most aren't ready to face themselves, let alone someone else's truth. So they choose the easy story. They call you ordinary because calling you extraordinary would expose their own stagnation. They pretend you're simple because admitting your complexity would force them to question why they never grew. Their blindness wasn't an accident, it was self-preservation. But blindness doesn't protect forever. Time reveals what people try to hide, and your depth, no matter how much they tried to ignore it, is surfacing. Every decision you make rooted in wisdom. Every step you take born from resilience. Every move you make that contradicts their assumptions, it all pulls the truth into the light, and they can't unsee it now. Their whispers tell the story. Why didn't we see it? How did this person slip past us? They ask it not because they care, but because their pride is cracking. They hate that their judgment was shallow. They hate that they dismissed what they never took the time to understand. And now, that hatred is turning inward, because every reminder of your depth feels like a mirror reflecting their emptiness. This is the sting of depth. It unsettles those who stayed on the surface too long. Your growth isn't just a victory for you, it's a threat to them, because it forces them to confront what they chose not to become. It reminds them of every chance they wasted, every comfort they clung to, every shallow step they mistook for progress, and that realization burns. You never needed them to see your depth. You carried it whether they noticed or not, but now that it's visible, the balance has shifted. They can't dismiss you with the same arrogance. They can't explain you away with the same excuses. They can't pretend you're ordinary when everything about you screams otherwise. Their story has collapsed, and your reality has taken its place. Think of how storms reveal what's hidden. The shallow pools evaporate in the heat, but the ocean remains. It doesn't matter how loud the winds roar, how heavy the rains fall, the ocean stands. That's you. Their shallow judgments evaporated the moment truth tested them, but your depth remains, unshaken, undeniable. They're unsettled not just because they misjudged you, but because your depth exposes theirs, or rather, their lack of it. Your wisdom highlights their ignorance. Your courage highlights their fear. Your persistence highlights their excuses. That's why they resist you, not because of who you are, but because of what you reveal about them. And yet, notice how some of them begin to shift, not because they suddenly respect you, but because depth demands acknowledgement. Even those who mocked start to fall silent. Even those who doubted start to watch more closely. They may not say it, but their actions reveal it. They see now what they denied before, and whether they like it or not, they can't unsee it. Depth isn't always loud. It doesn't need to be. It doesn't announce itself with noise or flash. It simply exists, steady and undeniable, while everything shallow fades. That's the power you carry. You don't need to prove your depth. It proves itself every time shallow people collapse in your presence. So let them circle the surface. Let them cling to shallow pools, convinced that's all their island. While they stay safe in their puddles, you move like the ocean, expansive, unpredictable, impossible to contain. Their ignorance doesn't limit your depth. It only exposes theirs. And this is the wound they can't close. They tried to define you by ripples, but you revealed yourself as waves. They tried to dismiss you as puddles, but you proved yourself an ocean. And now, every time they see you, they feel the pull of depths they will never reach. They chose the shallow end, but the shallow end can't protect them anymore, because depth always exposes emptiness, and your very existence is exposing them. They skimmed the surface of who you are, but now the tide has risen, and the tide has a way of drowning lies. They worked hard to press you into a mold, a shape they understood, a category that kept you small, predictable, easy to control. They wanted you to live within the lines they drew, to repeat the patterns they handed down, to never wander beyond the boundaries they marked. To them, predictability meant power, and as long as you stayed inside their mold, they could feel secure. But molds aren't made for those who carry fire. Pressure doesn't always shape it, sometimes shatters, and that's what happened when they tried to confine you. Instead of conforming, you exploded through the cast, leaving it in shards sharp enough to cut their hands. Now they're standing in the wreckage, baffled, asking themselves why you refuse to fit. It unsettles them because molds have worked on others. They've seen countless people accept the roles they were handed, shrinking to stay safe, bowing to expectations that suffocate growth. They thought you would be no different, but you weren't made for safety. You were made for expansion, and the very walls they thought would hold you became the first things you destroyed. Picture them pouring molten metal into a cast, certain it would harden into the shape they wanted. But the fire burned hotter, the pressure built stronger, and instead of solidifying into their design, the mold cracked apart. What emerged wasn't their creation, it was something entirely your own. Stronger, sharper, uncontainable. That's you. Their frustration shows in their whispers. Why can't this person just follow the rules? Why can't they just be like everyone else? But deep down, they know the answer. Rules were never written for people like you. The path they offered was never going to hold you. You don't think in straight lines. You don't walk roads that others lay down. You carve your own way, and that unsettles those who find comfort in conformity. This is why your presence feels disruptive to them. It reveals how fragile their molds always were. They wanted you to prove that boundaries are unbreakable. But by breaking them, you expose the truth. Boundaries are illusions. Rules are only as strong as the fear that sustains them. And once someone refuses to bow, the whole structure looks weak. That's the power your life carries, the ability to reveal that what they thought was unshakable is paper thin. Think about how many times they told you to stay quiet, to play small, to stay within the limits they set. Their words weren't advice, they were chains. Chains disguised as guidance, boundaries dressed up as wisdom. But you didn't wear those chains. You cut them. And now your freedom exposes the shackles they still wear. This is the part they can't stand. Your refusal to fit doesn't just free you, it unsettles them. It reminds them that they could have broken their molds too, but they didn't. It reveals how much of their life has been lived in cages they never questioned, and no one likes to face that kind of truth. Your growth proves that molds don't hold power. Expansion proves that limitations dissolve under courage, and your journey shows that conformity is optional, not inevitable. That's why they resist you, not because you're wrong, but because you're proof they never had to stay small. Imagine a field of identical flowers, each one neat, uniform, predictable. Then one grows taller, brighter, reaching higher than the rest. It doesn't apologize for standing out, it simply grows. And the others resent it, not because it harmed them, but because it revealed what they never dared to do. That's the weight you carry, the proof that growth is possible beyond the mold. Their resistance is louder now. They try harder to shrink you, to dismiss you, to label you. But the louder they push, the clearer it becomes that their mold has already broken. Labels can't contain you, because labels fall apart the moment reality doesn't fit them, and your reality has outgrown every label they tried to stick to you. This is the truth you embody. Life isn't about staying inside the lines. It's about expanding them. It's about drawing new ones when the old ones crumble. It's about refusing to let someone else's design define your destiny. You carry that truth in the way you move, in the way you grow, in the way you refuse to bow to molds that were never built for you. And now they're left with nothing but fragments of what they thought would hold you. Broken molds, shattered expectations, boundaries that never stood a chance. The very tools they used to control you became the evidence of your freedom. And every time they look at the wreckage, they're reminded of how wrong they were. So let them stare at the shards, let them whisper their frustration, let them cling to the comfort of molds that never served them. While they stay stuck, you rise beyond. While they cling to shape, you move in freedom. While they fear the unknown, you expand into it. That's the difference between those who bow to boundaries and those who break them. They wanted you predictable, but predictability was never your destiny. You weren't made to fit. You were made to fracture, to disrupt, to expand. And now, every step you take forward cuts deeper into the illusion that molds define lives. They tried to press you into their frame, but frames are fragile, and you were fire, and fire never stays contained. They can strip away titles, they can take possessions, they can even attack your reputation, but there is something at the center of you they can never reach. Your essence. The core that doesn't bend under pressure, doesn't fade with time, doesn't crumble when storms hit. That essence is your foundation, and it's what terrifies them most. The world measures worth in shiny distractions, cars, clothes, houses, applause, temporary things that look solid but collapse the moment circumstances shift. That's why so many cling to them. They think if they can decorate the surface, they'll never have to face the hollowness underneath. But you've seen through that lie. You know true worth is not built on what can be taken. It's built on what cannot be touched. Imagine two houses side by side. One is big, flashy, polished, designed to impress from the street. But inside, the walls are thin, the foundation is weak, and the first storm threatens to tear it apart. The other house looks modest, even plain, but its foundation is stone. Storms come, winds roar, but it doesn't move. That's you. They built their lives on surfaces. You built yours on the core, and that's why they can't shake you, no matter how hard they try. This is what unsettles them. You're calm. When storms hit, when lies spread, when pressure rises, they expect you to collapse like they would, but you don't. You stand steady, not because you're untouched by pain, but because your strength runs deeper than appearances. Your calm isn't denial, it's power. The kind that comes from knowing nothing external can strip the essence of who you are. And that essence is rare. Most people never cultivate it. They spend their lives chasing validation, collecting labels, building towers on sand. You chose differently. You chose depth. You chose to invest in what cannot be taken. You chose to build a foundation no storm could touch. And now, when their shallow measures fail them, your existence reminds them of everything they never built. That's why they whisper, "Why won't this person bend? Why don't they break under the pressure? Why don't they care about impressing us?" The answer is simple. You've lived long enough to see how meaningless shallow approval island. You've felt the sting of being misjudged, the weight of being underestimated, the pain of being dismissed. And you realize something powerful: none of those opinions could ever touch your core. They can take away opportunities, but they can't take away your persistence. They can strip away applause, but they can't strip away your resilience. They can try to bury your name, but they can't bury your essence. That's the truth that rattles them every time you rise again. Because your core is untouchable, and untouchable terrifies those who thrive on control. Think of how many times they tried to define you with labels. Too quiet, too different, too ambitious, too stubborn. They thought those labels had power, but labels only stick to surfaces. They never reach the core. And once you know who you are, once you know what you carry, labels become dust in the wind. Their attempts to define you collapse, because definitions can't contain essence. Your worth doesn't need their validation. It doesn't need applause, likes, or recognition. It exists because it island, and that's what makes you dangerous to them. They can't buy it, they can't borrow it, and they can't steal it. It's yours, and yours alone. This is why your presence feels heavy in rooms where others rely on masks. They sense it. They can't always explain it, but they feel it. The weight of authenticity, the steadiness of someone rooted in truth. The power of a person who refuses to trade essence for appearance. It unsettles them, because it reminds them that everything they've built is fragile. And yet, this is also why some are drawn to you. Authenticity attracts even those who don't understand it. Depth pulls at those who are drowning in the shallow. Your essence not only unsettles, it inspires. And though many will never admit it, their eyes follow you because they want a glimpse of what they've been too afraid to build. You didn't arrive here by accident. Essence is forged, not gifted. Every setback carved strength into you. Every disappointment hardened your resolve. Every betrayal sharpened your discernment. Every storm forced your roots deeper. That's how the core was built. That's why it can't be shaken. And here's the irony. The very things they thought would break you became the tools that shaped you. The very storms they hoped would drown you only made you stronger. The very losses they cheered for only deepened your foundation. They thought they were winning while you suffered, but all they were doing was adding layers of strength to the core they can never touch. This is why you must never mistake their surface-level victories as true success. Shallow wins look loud for a moment, but they fade. Depth endures, and your endurance has already proven itself. So let them cling to their hollow trophies. Let them chase applause that fades with the next distraction. Let them decorate houses with weak foundations. Because when the storm comes, and it always comes, you will still be standing, not because you had more, but because you are more. They can strip away everything that can be touched, but they can't reach what's untouchable, and the untouchable is where your real power lives. That's why you're still here. That's why you keep rising. That's why nothing they do can stop you, because your essence isn't up for negotiation. They built their lives on surfaces, but you built yours on stone, and stone never bows to storms. They tried to keep you frozen in their memory, stuck in the version they once knew, the one they thought they could define, the one they assumed would never change. To them, you were a snapshot in time, small, predictable, unthreatening. But growth has a way of breaking chains, and nothing unsettles people more than watching someone they dismissed rise into someone they can no longer control. This is what burns them now. You refuse to stay where they left you. You refuse to accept the limits they set. You refuse to shrink for their comfort. And by refusing, you proved something that terrifies them. Limits aren't real. They're cages made of words, sustained by fear, and destroyed by growth. Every step you've taken beyond those limits has been a reminder that they were never walls at all, only illusions. Think of how they reacted when you first started growing. They laughed, they mocked, they told you it wouldn't last. Their voices were loud because their confidence was fake. Deep down, they hoped you'd believe them, that you'd stop before you proved them wrong. But you didn't stop. You pushed, you stretched, you grew, and every inch of that growth exposed their lies. Imagine a seed planted in shallow soil. They thought it would never take root. They thought the ground would suffocate it, that the lack of space would keep it small. But the seed dug deeper, roots spreading beneath the surface where no one could see. And then, one day, it broke through the ground, stretching upward toward the light. That seed is you. And every leaf, every branch, every bloom is a reminder of how wrong they were to think you'd stay buried. This is what unsettles them most. Your growth isn't just visible, it's undeniable. They can't argue with it, they can't erase it, they can't silence it. Every achievement, every breakthrough, every comeback you've made is evidence. And evidence doesn't care about their opinions. It simply exists, daring them to deny it while the world watches. Your growth exposes their stagnation. While you stretched upward, they stayed still. While you invested in change, they clung to comfort. While you risked the unknown, they hid in the familiar. And now, every step you take forward reminds them of the steps they refused to take. That's the sting they carry. Not just that you grew, but that you grew while they didn't. They whisper questions in private. Why didn't we see this coming? Why didn't they stay small like we expected? But the answer is simple. Growth was always in your nature. You carried hunger they never understood, courage they never had, resilience they couldn't measure. It was only a matter of time before you outgrew the mold they tried to keep you in. And here's the truth. Their blindness is not your burden. It was never your job to convince them. It was never your duty to fit into their shallow view. Your only responsibility was to keep growing, no matter how loudly they doubted. And you did. That's why you're here now, standing in places they swore you'd never reach. Growth unsettles people because it forces them to face themselves. Your rise makes them ask why they stayed still. Your courage makes them question why they chose fear. Your persistence makes them confront every excuse they ever told themselves. And no one likes facing that mirror. That's why some resent you, why some resist you, why some try to drag you back. It's not about you, it's about what you reveal in them. But their reaction doesn't stop your mission. You've already proven you don't need their approval. You don't need their applause. You don't even need their understanding. Your growth is its own validation. Every step upward is confirmation that the universe honors persistence, not opinions. That's why you keep climbing, no matter how much noise surrounds you. And don't miss, this growth doesn't just elevate you, it elevates others. Every time you break a chain, you prove to someone watching that chains can break. Every time you outgrow a mold, you show others that molds are fragile. Every time you rise higher, you shine a light on the path for those who are still finding their way. That's why your growth matters beyond you. It's not just personal, it's collective. Some will never understand, and that's fine. Their hesitation, their fear, their small vision has nothing to do with your mission. You know who you are, you know what you carry, and you know where you're headed. Your journey isn't about making them comfortable. It's about fulfilling the calling that was always inside you. So keep stretching, keep pushing, keep reaching into spaces they swore were impossible, because every time you rise higher, you remind the world that their limits were never yours. You prove that growth is not just survival, it's destiny. And here's the sharpest truth of all. The higher you rise, the smaller their doubts look. The louder your truth speaks, the quieter their lies become. The further you grow, the harder it is for anyone to deny that you were always meant for more. They tried to freeze you in the past, but the past was never your prison, it was your soil. And soil doesn't hold seeds forever. Seeds were made to break through, to grow, to rise. That's what you've done, that's what you'll keep doing, and that's what will haunt them every time they see you, knowing they tried to bury you, but instead, they planted you. The journey through these words wasn't just a story, it was a mirror. Every doubt they threw, every lie they built, every attempt to shrink you has collapsed under the weight of truth. You've seen it, you've felt it, and now you know. The world cannot box what was designed to break boundaries. This is bigger than recognition, bigger than revenge, bigger than proving them wrong. It's about stepping fully into the force you were always meant to be. The kind of force that doesn't ask permission, doesn't wait for approval, and doesn't stop at obstacles. They called you ordinary, you became extraordinary. They tried to bury you, you grew into roots and branches that broke the ground itself. They laughed at your silence. Your silence became the roar that shakes their walls. And now, as their illusions fall away, your reality stands taller than ever, unshaken, unbreakable, undeniable. Remember this: oversubscription may have been the start, but it's not the end. It's just the proof that you're part of something too vast to contain, too powerful to silence. So stand tall, chosen one. The box has shattered, the mask has fallen, the mold is dust, the limits are gone. And the next time they look at you, they won't see what they thought they knew. They'll see what the universe always knew. The real deal.